For the best possible results, how far would you travel? Would you take an international flight to find a hospital that ranked among the very best in the world for the treatment of heart attacks? For the best possible results in 9 cardiac care measures, just how far would you go? St. Tammany Parish Hospital, world-class healthcare, close to home.
Welcome to Healthy Living, brought to you by St. Tammany Parish Hospital. I'm your host, Amanda Paxton. Diabetes is a huge issue in the United States. According to the American Diabetes Association, in 2012, almost 10% of Americans had diabetes, and that number grows by 1.4 million cases every year. Diabetes, especially type 2, affects many Americans of all ages and ethnicities. With November being Diabetes Awareness Month, today I have 2 guests here to discuss the topic of diabetes. Our first guest is Terry Compton, the Diabetes Education Program Manager at St. Tammany Parish Hospital. And later on, we'll hear from a patient's perspective on diabetes and the Diabetes Education Program. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you very much.
So can you first tell us what diabetes is?
Well, diabetes is a condition in where your body is not able to process your food well. Our pancreas makes the hormone insulin, and insulin is necessary for our body to use our glucose from our food that we eat. It actually puts that glucose that our body processes from our food into the cells to be used for energy. Unfortunately, when people are diagnosed with diabetes, about 50% of those cells that make that hormone insulin have already been destroyed or are unable to make that hormone insulin. So they're actually having problems with the way their body uses their food.
Okay, and what's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
Well, the primary difference is the ability of the pancreas to make that hormone insulin. With people with type 1 diabetes, they have to take insulin to live. It's not a choice because our body needs insulin to process our food. If we don't have that, they can become very sick and will die. With type 2 diabetes, the body makes the hormone insulin, but maybe doesn't make enough, or the body doesn't know how to use it well. And so they still make insulin, but just not in the same way that they should.
Okay, and so what are some risk factors for type 2 diabetes?
Well, being over the age of 40, being overweight, having a history of diabetes in your family, having high blood pressure, because we've seen an association with heart disease and diabetes, being of certain ethnicities, such as being African American or Latino, Hispanic, all put you at risk. Even having had diabetes during your pregnancy, called gestational diabetes, puts a woman at risk for developing type 2 diabetes many years later.
Okay, and so I guess from the difference between type 1 and type 2 can sometimes be avoided, whereas type 1, it's going to happen?
Well, we can look at the risk factors for developing diabetes, and if you are in the category what we call pre-diabetes, certainly with food monitoring and looking at physical activity can certainly reduce those risks in terms of actually developing diabetes. And yes, so we have that choice. Certain things we can't modify just because of who we are and our ethnicity and so on, but we certainly can with certain other factors.
Okay. And so what are some suggestions that you would make for someone that's dealing with a new diagnosis?
The hard part is just initially understanding what diabetes is, because it is a very invisible disease, and many times people don't know the severity of what can happen when they ignore it. And so the thing is getting education, certainly understanding that diabetes is a nutrition-based disease, and you really have to have a good concept of what types of food to eat and how much, because that has a certain impact in how well it affects your blood sugar. But increasing physical activity can certainly be a big factor, and then medications is also the next line of how we manage diabetes.
And what are some of those consequences of not managing diabetes?
Unfortunately, having high glucoses for long periods of time is not very forgiving to our body. It can affect our eyes, our kidneys, our nerves, also our heart. And so all of these things are very silent changes that occur in our body over time, having that high glucose for many years.
Okay. So for those that are diagnosed with diabetes, what are some ways that they can manage it and some specific lifestyle changes that they should make?
Well, as a diabetes educator, I really believe that everyone who has diabetes needs to come for education. It should be considered part of the treatment modality, just as if you were giving a pill. so that people understand that they have the ability to understand how to manage their diabetes directly. So we look at the types of foods that you eat, how we can adapt that to your lifestyle so that we can consider the amount of carbohydrates, which are the foods that directly affect your blood sugar, and then to understand how to monitor your blood sugar by doing glucose testing. And then again, there are medications that work on all many different areas of our body that can help control that blood glucose as well.
So with the diabetes education program, is that something that people do forever? Is it a short period of time just to get your diabetes under control? How does that work?
Well, obviously it depends on where you are in terms of your age. People who have Medicare are entitled to that benefit as a Medicare beneficiary. So you can get up to 10 hours in that first year when you're diagnosed with diabetes, or anytime that you find out you have diabetes, you can get that education as a Medicare benefit. And then annually, you're also entitled to that as well. Most private insurance companies do pay for diabetes education. It benefits them to have you be in control, because what we want to do is prevent long-term complications and hospitalizations.
Okay. The holidays are coming up, and so one of the big things I think that can throw people off diets or probably managing their diabetes can be temptations with parties and things like that. Do you have any suggestions for how people can avoid those temptations?
I think the hard part is that we, especially with Thanksgiving coming up, we like to prepare our most favorite foods. And those are the things that we see as tradition and what we all share, because we share the common table and enjoy that time with family. It's not that you can't have the foods that you enjoy, but looking at the amount or the serving size of what you may select. I do recommend that we do usually have a bounty on our table, and it's usually more than what we typically would have for any particular meal, is to pick the most things that you really want to enjoy and just be selective so that you can have that. But even after you have that meal, walk, go do something, get physically active. Just don't sit down and watch that football game, or get lazy and take that nap. Physical activity can have a big, tremendous impact on your blood sugars just by helping your body utilize the food that you've eaten.
Okay, and so you mentioned portion sizes a little bit, and I know that's a huge issue we have in this country. Every restaurant we go to, the portion sizes seem to get bigger and bigger. What are some things that everybody can do to know what they should know about portion sizes and how to control them?
Well, some people have a misconception that a portion is actually what we're actually supposed to eat. Whatever's put on the plate can be a portion of potatoes or a portion of corn, but actually what is considered that amount to make a serving within that portion is really the big key. So we look, with carbohydrate counting, we look at how much makes up to about 15 grams of carbohydrate. So the equivalent would be like a half a cup of corn is considered one serving, but you may put several servings on your plate, which would be a portion. So really understanding what is that serving size, such as a slice of bread is about 15 grams of carbohydrate, or 3/4 of a cup of cereal. But what we typically put in a bowl is much more than that serving. So we have to understand how many servings we're putting to make that portion.
Okay. Earlier you mentioned gestational diabetes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, gestational diabetes is where a woman who's pregnant happens to have a hyperglycemic state, meaning their blood sugars are elevated during a phase of their pregnancy. Our obstetricians are doing excellent screenings to make sure women are being screened for that. But the hardest part is that when women have high blood sugars during pregnancy, that glucose goes through the placenta to the child and makes the child grow at a larger rate than they really need to be. And it also is that when the baby's born, they could be larger than size and even at a risk for other complications. And so we want to control how high those blood sugars are in the woman to manage the baby and the baby's health.
And so what causes gestational diabetes? Is it similar to type 2, or does it just happen naturally sometimes?
Well, during pregnancy, our body makes a lot of hormones through change. And many of those hormones make our body resistant to our own insulin to be able to be used well. And so what happens when we have insulin resistance, our body doesn't know how to process that glucose from our food, and so it causes the blood sugars to be elevated. With gestational diabetes, we really manage it through nutrition and sometimes also with insulin. And there is one oral medication that can be prescribed. Usually when women are diagnosed with gestational diabetes, they'll do anything they need to do for a short period of time to make sure that their babies are born healthy.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about diabetes?
Well, just so that we know that diabetes in November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, and the theme this year is Tell Your Story. And I think when people hear someone's story, it's much more personal for them to be able to relate to why it's important. Because diabetes, again, is a very invisible disease, and people can be very judgmental because they really don't know how diabetes affects other people. And so we want people to be supportive, to know that it's treatable and that it can be managed.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'd like to thank Terry Compton, the program manager for the Diabetes Education Program at St. Tammany Parish Hospital, for coming and telling us a little bit about diabetes and diabetes education. Up next, we have Louis DeSalle, a diabetes education patient, here to give us a little bit of information about his journey through diabetes.
When it comes to your family's health, you want the best. That's exactly why St. Tammany Parish Hospital and Ochsner are now working together. By uniting two of the highest quality healthcare organizations in the state, we can bring everyone in St. Tammany Parish a higher level of specialty care with advanced procedures and the most advanced technology. Because when your healthcare is better, so's your life.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for Sunny Face Eggs for my baby sister.
For my fishing buddy.
Thanks for my mama's gumbo. Thanks for my mom.
We enjoy receiving awards and recognition from our peers, but the true reward comes from seeing positive outcomes for our friends and neighbors. So thank you for trusting us. St. Tammany Parish Hospital, world-class healthcare close to home.
Welcome back to Healthy Living, brought to you by St. Tammany Parish Hospital. Our next guest is Louis DeSalle, a diabetes education patient that worked with our previous guest, Terry Compton, to manage his diabetes. And he's here today to tell us a little bit about his journey and how he dealt with the diagnosis. Welcome, Louis.
Thank you.
So when did you first get diagnosed with diabetes?
December of last year.
Okay. And how did you feel when you got that diagnosis?
Denied. It felt like, they didn't know what they was talking about because I felt normal.
Right. Well, and I know from talking to you earlier, you realized after you got better that that really wasn't normal, right?
Well, after I met Terry and she explained a few things to me, I started to realize, well, yeah, that's happening to me. Yeah, I do that. I feel that. And then I went on the treatment, and didn't take very long to realize that I had it worse than I anticipated.
Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about your treatment, what kind of things did you do to start managing it?
Well, right off they put me on two types of medication to begin with. But the biggest things that you do right away is you change your diet, you change your way of living, and you change not only what you eat, but how much you eat and when you eat.
Okay. And so can you give me some specifics on what some things you did to change that?
Well, I always was a big eater. I always liked white bread, white rice, gravy, meat with a little fat on it. Fat's got the flavor. And I always had a big plate and always went back for seconds. And I don't do that anymore. I mean, I still eat a little bit of white bread and a little bit of rice, but probably 15% of what I used to eat.
Oh, wow.
Eat a lot of steamed vegetables now. Bought a wok, bought some bamboo steamers.
Oh, wow.
You can buy at any grocery store all sorts of steamable meals that are healthy for you.
Oh, okay.
Like teriyaki beef with no fat on it, very little sugar in it, lots of vegetables in it. And you start eating them sort of things and give up the cake and eat regular hours too. Try and eat about the same time every day.
Okay.
And learn how to take your medicine. And I say learn how to take your medicine because some of that medicine will make you very sick if you don't take it right.
Oh, wow.
So, especially metformin. If you don't take metformin correctly, It'll make you feel real, real bad.
Okay, so it's a lot about learning just how to manage your day, schedule your day, plan things out.
What you eat, how much you eat, and when you eat it.
Gotcha.
And to take your medicine. And weigh yourself, Keith. I never used to weigh myself, but I do that regularly now. Okay. Watch your weight. Get to manage your weight.
Yeah, I know that from what Terry said, that seems to have a lot to do with type 2.
Yeah.
So how did the diabetes education program help you?
Well, they taught me the correct foods to eat. They taught me the foods that I would eat and why it was causing my diabetes. And they educated you on you know, what to eat, when to eat, how to prepare it, how much of it to eat, how to take your medicine again.
Right.
That's so important, taking your medicine, you know, at a regular scheduled time. And I was eating 3 meals a day. I only eat 2 now.
Okay.
I usually give up one of them. It's not always the same meal. In place of it, I take a protein drink,
Okay.
which satisfies me. So.
Okay, and so was having the support of family, friends, and the diabetes program, did that help a lot?
Yeah, I mean, my wife supported me immensely. You know, I don't know why she wants to keep me around so long, but she's a major player in it. I mean, she's the one that prepares the meals. And Terry Compton, the lady who was on before me, she was absolutely 100% in my corner, easy to get in touch with. She guided me. It was easier for her to get in touch with my doctor to change my medication than it was for me, and she'd get back to me quickly. And so St. Tammany Parish Diabetes Awareness Group there, they were just, they were a major part of me getting everything in balance, getting where I can live with my diabetes, and that's what I'm doing now.
That's great. Earlier you mentioned feeling differently after getting it under control. Can you tell me some of the differences on things that you maybe didn't notice at first, that was you feeling bad, and now you've noticed that since you've made those changes?
Well, no, you don't notice that you feel bad. Diabetes, in my case, came on me so slowly that I was just used to it. I mean, it was the way, I thought you felt that way when you got my age.
Right.
You know, I accepted that. I mean, I didn't, you know, I thought that I didn't have the energy to do the things I used to do, and you know, but once I was diagnosed and they got my diabetes under control, I got so much more energy. I got a lot longer fuse than I used to have, because you develop a real short fuse when you have diabetes.
Really?
Yeah, well, short enough where you wonder why people don't come around no more. At least that's how it worked on me.
Right.
But it just, everything. I mean, you think clearer. You're willing to do things. I took a trip to Lafayette yesterday and back, and November last year I would have never done that.
Really?
It'd have been too far to go.
Really?
And I used to travel to Lafayette every week when I was in business. It was nothing to travel there, but it become too far for me to go because I got so sluggish with the diabetes. Diabetes slows you down so much. It just changes your whole life. You know, it makes you a new you when you get it under control.
Wow.
So.
Okay. Well, what's some advice you'd give to someone that has just been diagnosed with diabetes?
Well, if you can, go to see Terry Compton at St. Tammany Parish Diabetes Help Center, whatever it's called, and take the 2 classes they have. I mean, they're very, very, very informative. They'll give you the pamphlets. You can bring the books you can go home with and reference, because you can't remember everything they're going to teach you.
Right.
It's all about your diet is what they teach you. It's all about controlling your diet and controlling your diabetes. And, you know, if you can't do that, I mean, find out as much as you can from your doctor and do what they tell you and change your life, change your eating habits, and take your medicine, and you can live with diabetes for a very long time.
Right.
If you manage it. And it's manageable,
It is.
you know. If you don't manage it, you can lose a limb and go blind and die from it. You know, it's a very serious disease.
Right.
It's a lot more serious than most people realize.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that because I don't think people, I think they just think, oh,
Diabetes, yeah, well, you know, my grandpa had it. He lived to be 90. Well, I mean, he probably did a lot more to take care of himself than you realize.
Right. I think a lot of what people do to manage it is hidden from their family or from
Right.
other people. So unless you're very close to them, you're like, oh, they're fine, but they're really doing a lot.
Exactly. I mean, people don't, my grandchildren don't know I only eat 2 meals a day anymore. They have no idea what I'm doing. And 4 of them live next door and they're there every day. They're there eating.
Right.
But they don't realize what my wife does for me to prepare my meals because I have diabetes. They don't realize how little I eat anymore as compared to, you know, I was almost 300 pounds. I'm down to 226 now.
Oh, wow.
Get new clothes.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think especially when somebody's not taking insulin,
Yeah,
it's different. You notice when people are giving themselves shots, whereas for you, you're doing a lot of other things to manage it.
I don't like needles. And when Terry told me I was so close to taking insulin, I said, we're going to have to do something to where I don't have to do that because I don't want to give myself shots. I just assume not to use the needle for anything.
That's good.
You know, so that was a big incentive for me to do the things that I've done that she taught me to do.
Right.
And helped me with so much.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
I thank you for having me.
This has been Healthy Living, brought to you by St. Tammany Parish Hospital. I'm your host, Amanda Paxton, and we'll see you next time.